Hello, I'm Neil Baer. Thank you for coming and joining Roxane Gay and Saeed Jones today in our creative nonfiction conversations series that we do in our Master of Science degree program in Media Medicine and Health at Harvard Medical School. So we've come over here today because Roxane and Saeed were at the medical school, so we thought it would be great to bring them here as well. So I'm going to introduce them, and it's really a great honor because I've read both of their works, and I'm sure you all have too. So Roxane Gay is a writer extraordinaire for all seasons: mysteries, short stories, essays, and opinion for the New York Times. She's the author of the New York Times bestselling Bad Feminist, the nationally bestselling Difficult Women, and the New York Times bestselling Hunger, unforgettable book. She also writes a newsletter, The Audacity, an apt word for the fierce and forthright stance she takes on social justice. Saeed Jones is really funny, and he's this year's artist in residence. We're really privileged in the Master of Science degree program at HMS. In 2019, he released his memoir, How We Fight for Our Lives, which won the Kirkus Prize for Nonfiction, a Lambda Literary Award, as well as a Stonewall Book Award. His most recent collection, Alive at the End of the World, was awarded the Ainsfeld Wolf Book Award for Poetry. As Roxane Gay's newsletter declaims, welcome to, quote, writing that bodily disregards normal restraints. This afternoon, welcome to a queer conversation that will boldly disregard normal constraints and restraints. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neil. Hi everyone. Roxane, my dear friend.
Saeed, my dear friend. It's great to be here.
It's good to be here. Welcome to the Saeed and Roxane show.
It's pretty amazing.
Pretty fucking great.
Say.
It's going to be the coolest thing that's happened in this building in years. We realized today that we have been friends for over a decade.
I would say probably 13 or 14 years.
Wow. And Roxane, in addition to being a friend, was one of my first nonfiction editors, and we've gotten to collaborate in so many ways. So this event series is going to be with all kinds of friends and collaborators over the course of the semester, and Roxane has so graciously agreed to be the first. So we are both going to read a bit of new work. I'm so excited to hear some new work from Roxane, and I'll read some as well. And then we'll have a conversation about creative nonfiction and how it can disrupt and liberate, but also, I love, she has so much insight to share about the living work, what it means to be a literary citizen, and certainly what it means to be writing and creating art at this time. So, do you want to get started?
Yes.
It's like Beyonce pre-sale, new Roxane Gay.
I mean,
what a moment.
So much going on, so much. But thank you, Neil, for that very kind introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here. Only Saeed could get me back here. So I'm thrilled to be here. I'm writing a book right now of writing advice, and it's called How to Be Heard. And so I thought I would read the first chapter about why I decided to write a book of writing advice, even though all writing advice is terrible. So, who I am today as a writer began with a broken heart. On Valentine's Day 2004, the woman with whom I was in a relationship that we didn't really call a relationship sent me an email, ending things once and for all. I was devastated, and I wanted nothing more than to get as far away as I could from Lincoln, Nebraska, and the ghosts of our relationship that was not really a relationship. As luck would have it, I was manning a table the following month at the annual National Society of Black Engineers Conference. Eager young engineering students milled about talking to university representatives about their programs, and those representatives promised the young engineers a bright and lucrative future. At the time, my future was neither bright nor lucrative. I worked as a communications specialist for the University of Nebraska-Lincoln College of Engineering, and all things considered, it was a pretty good job. I got to write for the alumni magazine and advise a student publication and create recruitment materials that were not at all reflective of the actual program. You know if you know. I I had a great boss who taught me a lot about writing and editing, but then I got dumped and I wanted something different. I sat at my table arranging and rearranging stacks of brochures advertising chemical engineering and agricultural engineering and mechanical engineering and all the other programs. I half-heartedly answered questions that were all a variation on how much money can I make with an engineering degree? And the answer was always more than I ever will with an English degree. Across the aisle from me was a woman representing Michigan Technological University. During lulls, we got to talking, and before long, she convinced me to apply to a PhD program in rhetoric and technical communication at her university. I knew nothing about that field. I knew nothing about Michigan Tech, but I did want to run away. In June, I received my acceptance and a generous financial aid package. In August, my youngest brother and I drove to Houghton, Michigan, and I realized that I should perhaps have put a bit more thought into the where of where I wanted to run away to. Houghton, Michigan is a deeply rural place, nearly 10 hours north of Detroit, in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. It is densely forested on the shores of Lake Superior, which is one of the most beautiful, desolate places I've ever been. The summers are short and the winters are long. The place gets more than 300 inches of snow a year. There's an Ojibwe reservation nearby, but other than that, few people of color to be found and nearly no black people. The roads are long and narrow and they wind through the trees. Deer hover at the shoulders, often running across two-lane highways when you least expect it. Industrial ruins from abandoned copper mines dot the landscape. In Hancock, the adjacent town where I lived, all of the street signs are in both English and Finnish, because Hancock boasts the highest concentration of Finnish people outside of Finland. Or at least, that's what I was told. There wasn't much to do, especially because I am not much of an outdoors person, and in the Upper Peninsula, the outdoors is all there is. Graduate school quickly consumed my life. I began teaching for the first time, a nerve-wracking thing for me. I was doing my coursework and learning an entirely new field and starting to think about my research. Because there was little else to do, I wrote during my free time. Short stories, blog posts, essays, a couple really, and I do mean really, bad poems. With each new piece, I became a stronger writer. I consulted the internet when I wanted to submit my work or learn how to write in a new genre or find an agent. I received so many rejections that I started to wonder if I would ever find any measure of success as a writer. And then I wrote even more. I had been published in the years before my doctoral program, but it was during these years that I unapologetically took myself seriously. I put in the proverbial work. There was no magic to it, though there was some luck, and I worked hard enough to be able to take advantage of that luck. So this is a book about writing. It is a book about how to use your voice and how to be heard. This book was originally going to be a slender volume about using your voice for TED Books, an imprint at Simon & Schuster. I was going to write about opinion writing and writing as advocacy, how there is no finding your voice because it is something already within you, and how there is no waiting for the confidence to use your voice because you'll probably be waiting for something too ephemeral that may never show up. Then that publisher offered $250,000 to Milo Yiannopoulos to spread his facile hate-mongering. I couldn't in good conscience publish a book with them, and I could afford to pay the advance back. I could afford to take the chance that someone else might want to buy the book, and I had the luxury of my day job just in case that didn't happen. Without a contract, I was free to rethink the project. At the time, I was teaching a graduate workshop on novel writing, where I had my students reading Stephen King's On Writing, one of the finest books on writing and living a dedicated creative life. And I wondered what I might say about writing, how I would articulate my thoughts on my own process, how I came to writing and becoming the writer I am. I have to tell you though, most writing advice is terrible. Most writing advice is more about the person offering the advice than the person meant to receive it. A lot of writing advice is grounded in broad platitudes and inspirational fodder, and rules I find myself breaking more often than not. And a lot of writing advice is contradictory and simplistic. There are a lot of books about writing that focus on writing as a spiritual practice and about the writing life as a higher calling. They are lovely books, some of which I return to time and again. This is not that kind of book. This is a practical book about writing because there are more than enough people discussing the importance of creativity and how to live a creative life. There are not enough people talking about what you need to do to make that life a reality. What writers really want from most writing advice is a blueprint or a map to get from where they are in their writing career to where they hope to be. That blueprint does not exist. Every writer's trajectory is different. Every writer's approach is different. There's no wrong way to be a writer unless you don't write. And so this is a book about writing. I'm not interested in writing something motivational and uplifting. I just want to write something true. I want to tell you a good story about how to be heard in the ways that matter most. Thank you.
I am so honored. Thank you for trusting us
Of course.
with this
No one's
concept of
heard
new
that.
work.
You're the
I
first.
know. Oh my gosh. Do we deserve? I think,
I think you did.
Thank you.
You do.
Earned it. Earned it. I'm going to read an excerpt from my work in progress, Home Out There. It is ostensibly a memoir about Black queer people needing to leave home in order to arrive at an understanding of home. But because I wanted to challenge myself, as my mentors always inspired me to do, but also because I understand that people don't trust the wisdom of Black queer people. People are so dismissive of our experience and wisdom. I wanted to entangle or enmesh my memoir passages with sections of cultural criticism and biography of three Black queer ancestors, Langston Hughes, Polly Murray, and Audre Lorde. And so I'll read a bit from the Langston section. Departures. A couple of years before Langston Hughes walked out of the subway station at 135th Street and Lenox for the first time, out onto the busy block where the New York Public Library stares directly at Harlem Hospital and the YMCA is just around the corner, he stood alone in the heavy quiet of his father's house in Toluca, Mexico. The teenager picked up one of his father's pistols and pressed the barrel against his head. Their summer together was a reunion Langston had been looking forward to his whole life. By the time the future poet laureate of the Negro race turned 2, James Hughes had abandoned his wife and son. It's unclear if James had even been present on the day Langston was born. Still, much like his father before him, the poet was named after his father, James Langston Hughes. But perhaps because of how quickly the father drifted away, that first name drifted too. His mother and grandmother called him by his middle name instead. As it happens, Saeed is my middle name. Like Langston, my legal first name bows to my father, and like Langston, I do not bow. My grandmother raised me until I was 12, he'd write in his memoir, The Big C, in 1940. Sometimes I was with my mother, but not often. His mother, Carrie, had a taste for color. She had hoped life with her new son would be defined by travel and fashion, maybe even Broadway one day. Instead, she found herself taking up whatever odd jobs she could. One winter in particular, Carrie and young Langston would sneak out onto the streets at night looking for pieces of wood that could be used as kindling. Carrie would jump on abandoned packing crates in order to break them into small enough pieces that could burn in the fireplace to keep them warm. She'd leave Langston with his grandmother for long stretches of time while she went looking for work and other lives. When they were together, Carrie would often glance at her son and see the man who had abandoned them both instead. The boy looked just like that devil, Carrie would say. You're just like Jim Hughes. You're as evil as Jim Hughes. Langston tended to go silent in the wake of these outbursts, leading Carrie to wonder if something was wrong with him. Maybe the boy was touched. It's a sad kind of funny, the frequency with which "what's wrong with you" is spat at children responding reasonably to unreasonable adults. His biographer Arnold Rampersad notes that throughout his life, the poet's favorite phonograph record was Billie Holiday's God Bless the Child, That's God His Own. Reading about Langston's early years is to watch him drift across the Great Plains and Midwest, pass between mother and grandmother, a lonely kid holding on to his books the way he wished someone would hold on to him. Of this time, he'd later note, "My life has been filled with a great envy for those persons who have grown up in one place, whose folks stayed put, and who have always had a home to come back to." And then, in the spring of 1919, a letter arrived from the devil himself. "You are to accompany me to Mexico for the summer." Langston was thrilled. Carrie seethed. This was the betrayal she had been projecting onto him all along. As Langston explained in The Big C, she said, after all she had done for me, if I wanted to go away and leave her, to go ahead. Go ahead. The devil had been quite busy. James, a former secretary to the general manager of the Pullman Company, had made enough money to own a house in Mexico City and in the nearby city of Toluca, as well as a ranch in the countryside. A far cry from the sting of not being allowed to take the bar exam in Kansas because he was colored. His dark brown skin, fluency in Spanish, and familiarity with U.S. and Mexican law enabled James to revise his life into a stern rebuke to the disrespect stitched into so much of his past in America. Unfortunately, however one might empathize with a black man born one generation away from slavery, deciding to leave the country altogether, by the time James was reunited with his son, disdain had curdled into venom. On the long train ride back to Mexico, the father and son passed through a small town in Arkansas. James noticed some black sharecroppers on Main Street and snickered. Look at the niggers. When I first read about this scene, I sat the book on my lap and looked out my living room window. The view offered no clarity. I ended up wandering my apartment, traveling from bookshelf to bookshelf until I found something to speak to the hurt churning in me. Racism is child abuse, Toy Derricott notes in her 1997 memoir, The Black Notebooks. As a black woman light enough to pass as white, Derricott uses her memoir to interrogate questions surrounding internalized racism, white supremacy itself, and perhaps most significantly, shame, arguing that shame has been a difficult emotion to acknowledge in our experience as blacks, difficult to name, to deal with, as if we talk about shame, we will indeed be shameful. I wondered if James had spoken loud enough for others nearby to hear him. They were almost certainly sitting in a segregated all-black train car by that point of the trip. What would a black woman sitting in the row behind James and Langston think of him saying, "Look at the niggers"? Did James keep his eye on those sharecroppers out the window as he talked? Or had he turned toward his son, prodding him in the ribs as if telling a joke? And when he heard it, what did teenage Langston do with his gaze? If he looked out that window as his father insisted, what did he see? And what did the seeing do to him? How did Langston feel? If he felt shame, was it because his father had embarrassed him, or because his father had simultaneously shamed his own son, the sharecroppers, and everyone else on that train simultaneously? The scene and the questions it unleashed seeped out across my mind like an oil spill, attaching itself to every thought and memory they touched. Then I heard laughter behind my eyes, and a memory in particular. "You a black lie," one of my aunts would always say when someone made her laugh. It was her version of "get out of town" or "you're too much." "You a black lie." Every memory I could summon of that woman, smiling and laughing, was accompanied by that same sentence. Years later, one of us finally asked, "Why a black lie?" And she said, "Because black people lie," as if she was commenting on the weather. Cruel joy is a strange sound. Instead of the warmth of someone's voice, you just hear fangs being bared. I decided I had to go for a walk. As I muddled my way down my block, shame set in before I could name it. I realized however many times I'd heard her call me and others a black lie, I hadn't even understood really what she was saying. It felt as if I'd been walking around with a knife handle sticking out of my chest, unnoticed, for decades. Only when I noticed it did I begin to ache and bleed. It's also when I realized I needed to figure out how to heal. Speaking of the silence and forgetfulness that often protects internalized racism, Derricott observes, quite accurately I might add, that we are afraid to know the ways in which the people closest to us, our parents, relatives, and friends, have contributed to our shames, fears, inadequacies, hatreds, and repulsions. Would it matter if I told you that that aunt is much lighter complected than myself? Maybe. But then again, James Hughes was notably darker than his son. If there is any logic to internalized racism, it's a warped and refracted white supremacy, which of course has no real logic other than total annihilation. Reading that scene from Langston's memoir knocked me off my feet. I must say though, low as I felt, something had been bridged. The hurt I felt for him, and then suddenly with him. did something to me, to us. Thank you. Wow, it is so scary sharing new work. All right, welcome back to the Saeed and Roxane show. Roxane and Saeed show, da-da-da-da, ba-ba-ba-ba. We need some uns. Like rugby dancer, go-go boys.
I'm sorry, I'm 50.
Okay, all right. I'll calm down.
Oh no, but the go-go dancers.
Go-go dancers, okay girl, like, come on. We're trying to live, sis, we're trying to live. But we're gonna talk, as you see, we are good friends, and I think that's a joy. I think like the friendship between artists is maybe a little mysterious to people. So we'll chat about all kinds of stuff, and then someone's gonna tell me when it's time for Q&A, and y'all can ask us questions as well into the mic. So people on Zoom, there are like 400 something people on Zoom. Hi Zoom, thank you for joining us. So
I love all the Zoomers who are like, I'm not leaving my house.
I get it. You know what I mean? We're
feel the same way.
multitaskers. We're multitaskers. Okay, so Liz, was it scary leaving Simon & Schuster? Because you and I talked.
Mm-hmm.
They were my publisher as well, and I was very scared and didn't feel I had enough capital.
Yes.
What did you feel like at that time?
It was very scary, but I mean, I'm a Black Haitian American queer fat woman, so like there are scarier things. At the time, I just thought, what is my body of work for if not for me to live out my principles? Now, let me be clear. All of the publishers are owned by profoundly not well people. My nonfiction is published at HarperCollins, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch. So, like, you know, you have to just pick your evil. But with Simon & Schuster, what really chapped my ass is that Milo Yiannopoulos is not smart, he's not interesting, he's not a good writer, he's not an interesting thinker. Like, even, you know, fine, be racist and whatever, but like, he's gay and he's married to a Black man. So like, let's talk about his husband.
I actually didn't know. Or maybe I compartmentalized
like,
it.
What's going on
to contain my rage.
there?
Yeah,
I know. And so he does this because that's where he can find the most attention, because he knows that he will never gain credibility with people who are progressive. And so, you know, like J.D. Vance and Usha Vance, he decided to sort of go for the lowest hanging fruit, which is hatred.
Yeah.
And so that made it in many ways very easy.
I see.
Because $250,000, which was more than the advances of my first 5 books combined.
Yeah. That's such a significant
2 of which were bestsellers. So, you know, I was just like, it's too much. I never care what other people make on their book deals, because it's not my book deal. But like, when you see that publishing is going to prioritize someone who can't write, who can't think, and give him that much money?
Yeah, I remember having a meeting with a publisher. We're just getting into the tea. I'm like, did I? Is this what we're, okay. Woo! Love on top, and we still got like 4 more, like, you know, octaves to go.
I love how we can always bring it back to Beyonce.
Yeah, she is the well, she is the water.
I mean, the alpha, the omega.
Know her, or be unknown. But I remember having.
I won? Anyway, sorry.
Oh, yeah. I loved it. I think she was like, y'all making sense now? Y'all decided to make sense in the
You
award?
finally did right by me? Seeley's curse might be ended.
Maybe. Let's see.
That's a very niche joke.
Yes, I love it. Love her little amen choir. Okay, so I remember having a meeting with a publisher about Milo, and we're not going to fixate on this, but it feels significant to like the bigger picture, because this person said, I just thought he was a provocateur. And I was like, have you read any, you know, so I think, and now we are, you know, enduring calamity from people who, many of whom were like kind of written off as, I just thought, you know, these terms, firebrand, you know, a personality, and it's just really frustrating, because significantly you hear undocumented people, you know, disabled activists, you know, trans women, Black women being like, it's not funny. They're not a provocateur. They want to burn down the house we all are living in. You know?
Well, also provocation can be interesting, but in the sense that it's being used there, provocation is meant to antagonize. It's meant to be harmful. And the reason we are where we are today is because people love to glamorize anyone who will say something that they secretly think. And they're cowards. And so they will absolutely valorize the people who say the loathsome things that they don't have the courage to say. And that makes it even more frustrating because then eventually you learn that there is rarely any substance to these people. And then they're like, oh, what happened? Oh, you mean he's really going to do all of the things he said he was going to do? Like, believe people when they tell you who they are. And so it's very frustrating that publishing was in a moment then, and quite frankly is in that same moment now, where these people are called provocateurs, and there's no question of, but at what cost?
Yeah.
And to whom?
And in stark contrast, you and I teach, and have been teaching in different ways in different capacities, and it's a delight to get to teach here. It's always the student that's the antithesis of those provocative cowards, the students who have wisdom, who have experiences that I'm like, oh my goodness, just in office hours, thank you for sharing it with me. Let's figure out how we can get this to more people. What would you say to that student who is worried, feels that their story isn't even their own? Will I hurt my family or my loved ones just by writing about,
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. And I think about that a lot because there are so many people who have really important stories to share and important reasons why they want to share those stories. And they seem to talk themselves out of that opportunity before they even try.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting to see who has humility and who doesn't. And sometimes I think you can have too much humility. And so I always encourage those students, like, if not you, then who? If not now, then when? It's important to share your story, and you should share it in a way that you can tolerate people engaging with that story in ways you can't control.
Yeah.
And that's really important. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
You can't control what happens when you put work into the public discourse. People are going to do all kinds of things with it, some of which are wonderful.
Right.
You can develop a readership, and that readership can be quite passionate, and that's wonderful, but you also can develop haters. And not just like hee-hee haters, but like really
death
bad people, death threats, rape threats, harassment. The thing that has been most striking to me is like these haters and these trolls and whatnot, they have a lot of free time. And they tend to, they do. I mean,
I hadn't thought about it.
It's shocking because they're like,
Yeah.
oftentimes, like, especially when I first started dating my wife, they would like Google her and send me like swastikas and all of this anti-Semitic nonsense. And
I can't even mail things
like,
I like to people I love.
Tell me about it.
Like, it's actually
I'm always
really
like, I don't want to clog your inbox. And here are these assholes who are sending me every form of bigotry you can imagine. And it's just, you have to be able to withstand that with regards to whatever it is that you're writing about. And you'll never begin to imagine the kinds of things that will set people off. Sometimes I'll write something that I know is kind of incendiary, but in a productive way.
Yeah.
Quiet, no response.
Yeah, where you've edited and you've like, it's like a diamond of a sentence.
I've anticipated every sort of pushback. And then I write something, what I think is innocuous, like, I hate the beach. And, which I do. And I will get like 5,000 emails of people, how dare you? Go walk in the sun. What's wrong with you? Are you trying to rid the world of oceans? And it's so you also know that you have to know that you can't ever know what is going to trigger people. Have you found that to be the case with your work?
Yeah, I mean, it's the range. I mean, for all I've got going for and against me, I am not a Black woman, and because we are long distance, I've seen in public spaces the boundaries people will respect with me, and that they push right over on the way to you. I have seen you and I say almost the same thing publicly, and it will be regarded. But I'm like. There's a point at which a Roxane Gay can say the sky is blue, and and it's not because people actually care about the sky. They instead, like Megan Thee Stallion, a turning point. I was like, it is impossible for this many people to like Tory Lanez's music. It is. I just do not believe.
I mean, can we pause here because First
Canada
of all,
ain't sending nothing but their
leave
worst.
that little Smurf.
Listen.
I know, between him and Drake, well, they're just trying to destroy.
Did you see his hairline?
They're plants.
Don't play with me.
Ops.
But it was a turning point for me, and I want to talk about like incel and men, because I was like, wait, they don't love Tory, because I was like, he doesn't have a body of work, he hasn't been out, he's not like that, not that it would be okay, but he's not, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, he's not Dre.
Yeah,
Who's also a problem.
He's not Dre, or Chris Brown, something like drives me crazy. But now we're at the point where people have fully grown up and moved through stages of their life, and for whatever reason, they've chosen to like make Chris Brown's music a part of it. That's not the relationship. I realize they hate this black woman, Megan Thee Stallion, more than they could possibly love or care about his
Correct.
music.
And they also hate that she dared to stand up for herself.
Yes.
She dared to not tolerate violence.
She
and
got
abuse.
shot.
Like
That
literally.
that was what she dared. If I get, please.
I mean, if a man had gotten shot, it would be like a tribunal at The Hague.
If I was out with friends wherever they were and I got shot in the foot, you could be anywhere in the world and like there would be like a beam of light in the distance and Roxane would be like, Saeed got shot. Like I would like, are you telling, I would not be able to shut up about this, right? Because my body is all I have. How dare you? So the idea that her speaking accurately about physical violence was like this unforgivable, it just blew my mind.
And it wasn't just violence.
Right.
He wasn't just shooting her.
He threatened her,
was
right?
trying to, well, that too, but he was attacking the way she was famous. She's known for her dancing,
Yeah.
in addition to her lyricism and other assets. I'm a fan.
We're all human.
I mean, just saying.
I'm
Bad
gay, but I got
feminist.
eyes. Hey,
Ugh,
work.
amen. She's fine as wine, but you know, she's also an incredible dancer with
Yeah.
bionic knees and ankles.
Yeah.
And God bless. And so for him to shoot her feet is incredibly symbolic.
Yes,
And
that's a good
incredibly
point.
dangerous. And
Yeah.
everyone, you know, as I watched the
Wow.
trial unfold, I was stunned at the depth of hatred that people have for women more broadly, but black women in particular. And of course, we have recently seen that again in November. That hatred, like people will block their own prosperity, safety, happiness, or even subsistence to keep a person of color,
Especially
a
a black
woman of
woman,
color, especially a black woman,
It's incredible.
from achieving anything.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's-
I mean,
it's
I think
interesting.
about, you know, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately in Kathy Park Hong's essay collection, Minor Feelings.
so
I
good.
think it's in the last chapter, she talks about the era, you know, moving out of the 1950s and we're trying to segregate communities, and communities mostly in the South, but not just in the South, that had community pools, swimming pools. It was very likely that those communities filled in those pools with cement. Right, this is what you're talking about, right? Like they would, like what? Like you would rather fill in this swimming pool with cement than allow it to be integrated. And I just, yeah, we're in this broad, and that's why I guess, you know, it's like Megan Thee Stallion, Tory Lanez, and how people, you know, talk to you and respond. But I guess I feel from Bad Feminist, which you just celebrated like 10-year anniversary. It doesn't feel that long to me.
It doesn't feel that long either. 10 years really did actually fly by.
Really did, in good and bad ways. But like to this moment, I guess, yeah, I feel we're gonna look back in 50 years and it'll be like 2 + 2 = 4. That the moment we are in and enduring is in large part about an antipathy to black women.
Absolutely, and you know, it's actually connected to what you were saying about people hate her more than they love Tory Lane. They don't want black women to have what they feel that they should have. And if black women have it and they don't, it's not that they should fix themselves to get that thing. It's that if we can't have it, or if she can have it, nobody can have it. If we both have it, I still feel oppressed. And it's gonna be the death of us all. Not to be like super depressing, but I mean, it's a challenging moment that we're in.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I say like white supremacy has no logic, but total annihilation, it comes for us all. And I think Though, that being said, like, that's why the work is, I like fully disassociated for a second. I was like, we are.
I know, like, we're, it's a problem.
I just like fully went to the ancestor room for like 2 seconds there. I'm back. Okay, no, but like, it's important to talk about this because, and this is why I share, you know, I know, like, you know, Melissa Phoebos's
Yes.
work with body work, that, like you said, the student or the writer or both, who should be telling their story, and you can do that in different ways. So much happens to us before we even sit down to start writing. And I think, you know, all of what we're talking about, like hip hop and pop culture and everything, like it can feel unrelated, but that's in the atmosphere that you're breathing as you're trying to do your work. So I guess I want to ask you, as the best of the best, one of one, how do you, the world has to fall away from me to write, and that gets increasingly difficult. So is that how you write? And if so, how do you get to that space? Because
I prefer to have the world fall away to write.
it would be nice.
That's my ideal writing circumstance, which is why I was so prolific during grad school. I really was living in the middle of nowhere, and I did have a long-term relationship, but it didn't start until 2 years in to my sentence. And so those first 2 years, I really had nothing to do. So it was just easy until recently. It was really easy to let the world fall away. But, you know, like this year the world is kicking my ass, and I'm trying to figure out how do I write when I can't have the world fall away.
When it's not ideal.
Yes, and I don't have answers, but it's so much easier when the world falls away because then I can say what I want to say, how I want to say it. And it's not that I'm without distraction, but it's like I'm in a Faraday cage. That starts with an F. The cage where you go in and it cuts off all your electronics because.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's what I love to have for writing. And it's not that I need to put a special app on my laptop or anything like that.
But like mentally, you
But
kind
just
of
like
need that.
mentally, which
Yeah.
is why I do my best writing generally between 10 and 3, 10 p.m. and 3 a.m.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
when
yeah,
there's
yeah.
like fewer actual
I
distractions.
love, not always, but I love to write at dawn for the same
Oh.
reason.
But yeah, like
Before, you know, the news
absolutely.
hasn't quite.
And I know a lot of morning
texting.
writers who write for that reason. Like I write before my family wakes up. I write after my family settles down for the night, and I can focus and just have some time to myself and just think and organize my thoughts in a way that I feel might be useful on the page.
Yeah.
But it's getting increasingly difficult to reach that space. And it's been this way for years. I've been struggling with writing for a very long time. And I'm not sure why, but.
And you're like one of those
see.
people who, because, you know, I've been in Roxane's house, and one of them. And I remember you had that whiteboard. Do you still have that big ass whiteboard?
Of course I do.
Girl, okay,
Yes.
so there's like a whiteboard about this size. And it was just every project.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like movie deadline, TV. But I remember it was like How to Be Heard. It was, I mean, it was the comic. I mean, it was, and I just sat. I was like, I'll never complain about my deadlines ever again. So you're very productive constantly, but that doesn't always mean like you're writing.
Yeah, I mean, and it's challenging because I say yes to everything, unfortunately. I'm working on it. But it's hard not to.
You should absolutely not say that in front of an audience.
I know, that's true. But it's hard not to because especially, I think when you're a black woman in the writing world and it's not that there are few of us, but so few of us are allowed to break through. You just feel like this might be the last opportunity. And I have a lot of responsibilities. I have a huge family. And I'm not like Becky over there. I just have a lot going on. And so in addition to like loving writing, I also just need the work oftentimes. And so it's trying to figure out how to balance all of that, which is very challenging. But I do remain prolific because I do enjoy it. And apparently I still have a lot to say.
You too, right? And we're grateful for it. We're grateful for it.
Thank you. But yeah, writing is a conundrum, but I love it still.
Yeah.
I must say,
Yeah.
I highly recommend.
Okay, so I know that this is, creative nonfiction. It's not right in front. Oh, it's probably above me. A creative nonfiction, but can I be greedy for a
Yeah,
moment?
let's go.
As you know, Toni Morrison is my pastor, and my dear friend Hannah is here, and love you, Hannah. And I'm always rereading Toni Morrison, but this is actually a rare time when someone else that I'm close to is also. And so, can I ask you some Toni Morrison questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I interviewed her once.
Shut up. So let's start there.
For Hemispheres, the United Airlines magazine.
Who says print media is dead?
They paid, at the time, they paid $4 a word.
Whoa.
This
Okay,
was
that's incredible.
probably 7 years ago.
Okay.
8 years ago, and she knew who I was. I almost died on the phone. I was just like, I mean, you didn't have to say that, so either you are just lying, which is fine.
I don't think she is.
But I felt like she was telling the truth. But what was interesting about her is, at this point, she has been asked everything, and though I did strive to ask her like a really original questions, in my heart, I knew she had been asked these questions before, but she answered them like it was fresh, like it was the first time. And she really did not, sometimes when you interview celebrities, you can just tell, like, if you're not like the publication of their choice, if you're not like the most esteemed, they don't take it as seriously. But she took that little Hemispheres interview as seriously as if it was Harper's. And I'll never forget that level of graciousness. And her answers were awesome. I felt like I learned things, and that's not even her job. All she had to do was participate in the interview. And I mean, that she even agreed to it.
Wow.
Like, Hemispheres?
Wow.
But
that's interesting because
hella people read Hemispheres.
Right.
Because back in the day when they used to have
That's
plain
true.
magazines, there was like nothing
it was a
else
big
to
deal.
do.
Yeah. And before you could like watch movies on your
Yes.
phone on the plane. Do you have a favorite Morrison novel or a Morrison novel that you return to the most?
Yes, of course, Beloved.
Okay. Why Beloved?
Because I'm still striving to understand it after having read it off and on for 23 years. And no, 33 years. Oh my God. Wow. But I love it. I think it's audacious.
It's incredible.
I think it's formally fascinating.
She reads the audiobook, by the way, and she's an incredible
I didn't know
reader.
that,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
am not surprised.
It's incredible.
It's just, on a sentence level, she's exquisite. She can write the hell out of a sentence, but it also just contributes to this like beautiful tapestry of language and meaning. And at the time I read it, I had only read one kind of story about enslavement. And so this offered something different. And it actually kind of reminds me of Robert Jones Jr.'s, or I guess conversely, Robert Jones Jr.'s The Prophets reminds me
and
of
I think
this.
he certainly refers to
Yes. Like, a lot of times when you read or watch slavery narratives, which are important, et cetera, I'm not trying to deny that, they tell a certain kind of story and like everyone is saintly and is just like sort of tolerating their lot. And in The Prophets, for example, they spit in the food of the enslavers, which makes perfect sense to me. Like, you would be eating saliva all the time and other
And
fluids.
way worse things.
I mean, so much worse. And also in the novel, they do. And we see some of that bitterness and that quiet rage in Beloved as well. And that was the first time I had seen that level of autonomy, and that the autonomy wasn't only directed to like being saintly or being perfect. It was directed to survival and making impossible choices in impossible situations.
And also, it was Beloved was the first book about both enslavement and freed slaves, because it's part of it. I love it's just everything's liminal, which I'm writing about journeys and home and the uncertainty and. But like disagreement. So like early in like when Paul D first shows up, and Seth is beginning to open up about the whole, like they were on the same plantation. So that's one, like, it's taught as if everyone on the plantation, everyone understood what everyone was going through and all had the same experience. And like women and men did not. And so that moment where she's like, and they took my milk, and he's like, yeah. And she's like, and they took my milk. She's so angry that, and I think it's like 3 times. And then out of frustration at Paul D as a man, not getting that. Think about what it would mean to take my milk, and take it from my baby. That and so 2 escaped, freed slaves from the same plantation who care about each other, still not agreeing, like actually felt, because there's such a monolithic way of talking about that period.
And I thought that was important to not flatten those experiences and to suggest that everyone had it the same, which is not the case.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even say that the men had it easy, because they dealt with abuses of a different kind or the same kind in different ways. And to see that sort of play out and to see it examined in the hands of someone who could honor that narrative was really important.
Incredible. Yeah.
She's outstanding. I mean, you already know that.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. But I'm with you.
superlatives.
The next time I read it, I got several books to go, I'm like in a rotation. I'm reading a lot of her interviews too.
Also playing in the dark.
Playing in the dark. And she has goodness in the literary imagination, which it's like a lecture. She did it at the Divinity School.
I have that.
It's
because there's a collected book of her essays and speeches.
Yes.
And it's actually quite good.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
She's a little underrated in terms of her nonfiction.
I think you're right. Yeah, but the next time I reread Beloved, which will be like the third or fourth time in my life, I want to understand the stream of consciousness chapter. It's like still a challenge, and I love, because that means I still get to, I will be forever young as long as I'm able to learn from Morrison's work, is how I feel.
And like just that she's just like, I'm gonna drop some stream of consciousness here. Why? It's up to you.
Figure
that out.
Figure it out.
I've given you everything you need.
Yeah, just like slaves had to figure Omega out. So
yeah.
the least you can do is figure my book out. Well, I do want to, because we're going to get to questions soon. What the fuck is up with men? Like,
How much time do you
I'm
have?
a man, and fated to be sexually attracted to men, and like,
I mean, that's
I know a
about
lot
the
of
struggle being
I
real.
know-
How do you do that?
I know so many men. I know so many men, and
Say more.
Some of my best friends are men, Roxane. And I've got to tell you, I was introduced to Black feminism, 2004, beginning of college, Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde, feminism and gender studies saved my life. But I can honestly say at the age of 39, I feel more estranged, I am struggling to understand manhood in America more than I ever have.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask you.
So are they.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know. I'm not going to ask you to solve men.
No,
unless you can.
Yeah,
Okay.
Nor would I want to. But I do think that there is a masculinity crisis going on. And if we don't address it, the world is going to explode. I think that girls were neglected for so long that a lot of our cultural programming then became, how do we allow girls to believe they can do anything, accomplish anything, et cetera. And boys were continuing to be educated in the same ways as usual, which clearly serves them very well. But I think that a lot of men and young men have started to feel abandoned and left behind. And it's not for me to say whether or not those feelings are legitimate. We feel what we feel.
Right.
But I think the real problem is that they see how their grandfathers lived, and they want that for themselves. And it's like, yeah, I too would like to buy a house for $19,000 and make a real living wage to support a family of 6 on a high school diploma. Talk about the dream.
Or
it's
like
the
your
dream.
grandparents were happily married, and I'm like, women couldn't even have credit
I know,
cards
like,
until the 1970s.
was Mama really
She wasn't happy.
No, she was
Yeah.
married. There's a difference. I love marriage. My parents have been married for 52 years. I think marriage is incredible. I'm married.
Some of my best friends are married.
Yes. No, I'm actually a big fan of the institution. I think it's incredibly grounding. I think when you're with a reciprocal and healthy and vibrant partner, it's the best thing that can happen to you. I love it. But many people, even now, many women are in marriage circumstances that do not serve their interests, that are really just prisons of a different name. And, you look at, like, especially in academia, so many like women my age who like paused motherhood for a very long time to get on the tenure track and then get tenure and then get full professor. A lot of us are like, how did all those men do it? there was a woman at home cooking and cleaning and typing up their papers and quite frankly doing most of their scholarship. And so like, I think a lot of people are trying to reckon with how can I get this thing that people used to have without recognizing what it cost. Like people made these things happen. It wasn't just that grandpa lived a good life. Grandpa had a support system. And that support system was oftentimes unacknowledged and unpaid domestic labor provided by a woman. And so we have to find a way of showing men like, yeah, it's okay to want what you want, but at what cost? Like you can't want chattel so that you can feel better about yourself. And you know, this idea that they shouldn't have to work for anything and that women are the bane of their existence and like they hate women, but yet they lust after women. It's a crisis.
Yeah. I also think
like
they're
group therapy.
I'm not trying to like call out people, but like my straight male acquaintance friends, that level, like third, are loners. Like I think it's also community.
Community is a
like
big
thick
part
community and like where you're where you have obligation, like you said, I was moved when you were like I have so many responsibilities, you said earlier, right? And the way that informs what you're doing. And I think queer people, we find home out there. That's what it's about. We learn because we have to create the structures. And I think Black people are generally better at it's like it's all about your relationship, I think, to patriarchy and white supremacy. But I'm just seeing these like dudes who they're listening to podcasts all day at work.
Which is, I mean, band podcasts.
Yeah,
honestly.
it's and as a man with a podcast, gotta say, I don't know, I'm a little worried. Our episodes are only 45 minutes because I don't think you should be listening to us all day long. And then they go home and then they play video games all night with their headsets on, and that's their community, and everything else is a disruption.
Yeah, and I really do think it's a huge problem. I have a 29-year-old nephew, and he's addicted to video games. Like, he'll admit it. And their community, a lot of these young men, is in the box. It's the guys that they curse out and call very bad names all the time. Like that's their idea of community.
Right. Like you're interacting with, and you listen, gay guys, I have gay male friends who their version of that is they're clubbing constantly and they've got a circle, but you're on but you're not talking. Yeah. That's not the, you're, you know what I mean? And so that feels gay or straight. I have noticed that. You are interacting, but you're not engaging. Yeah. And
I think it's just a socialization problem. There's a loneliness problem, but conversely, women are lonely too. Yeah. People are lonely regardless of their gender expression. Yeah. And so there are so many issues that I do think we as a society need to address. Yeah. And I have a lot of empathy for the young disaffected man. But the difference between young disaffected men and women is that they will blow up buildings.
They take it out.
Kill lots and lots of people and write dumb manifestos that are like basically plagiarized. Yeah. And women will turn that harm inward.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like all these dudes, you just need to read like any novel by a woman from the 20th century. Yes.
I mean, it's called The Yellow Wallpaper.
Read The Awakening, Jesus nigga. Christ. Like, get it together. Do you think read their eyes forget watching
and
God?
That's why there are limits to my empathy. It's like, yes, everyone has problems, but the idea that you don't have to fix it, that you don't have to engage in sort of having a more robust life. Like, girls won't talk to me. When did you bathe last? Like, truly, and I'm not even joking. I teach college. I love these young men. They're wonderful. They're smart. And when they open up, it's like they're like little flowers and they blossom. But like, son, let's talk about the hygiene. How often are you brushing your teeth? And the answers are shocking. A lot of them don't. I did my PhD at a school that was 75% men. Yeah. I've smelled it all. Yeah. Like, there are just basic things they could be doing.
I always think of Bowling. I went to Western Kentucky University, and in class, guys would have like these empty bottles.
For their chew?
And their chew tobacco, and it'd be like right by my foot, and I'd be like, if you knock this over, we're both going to jail. It is, I'm trying to like not end with men, but like this, I'm thinking of the student, the writer who feels they do not have authority to author their own story, right? And then also this guy who to the rest of us, ostensibly we're like, baby, you got everything going for, oh my God, you know what I mean? Like, little statistically, you have so much going for you. And as I tell to students all the time, I'm like, it's hard being a person, you know? But it's so interesting to see, like, from those two different positions, we're at Harvard, positionalities, modalities, and the praxis, that one person says, it is hard, am I valuable enough to kind of break through? And the other person, like the first moment of friction for the person with a lot of privilege, and it's not just men, right?
No.
But the person with a lot of privilege, it feels like oppression, actually. It actually feels, it
like,
seems
I have to work harder. I mean, and we've seen this play out, especially over the past 3 or 4 years, but longer, but specifically the past 3 or 4 years in a lot of different ways. I mean, that's why we're seeing all of the lawsuits about affirmative action and college admissions. Oh my God, I didn't get into an Ivy League? Yeah, you're right, nobody gets into the Ivy Leagues. They're hard to get into. Sorry, I didn't get into Brown. I'm still angry about it 33 years later.
Have you done an event there?
Yes, and I sure did say that.
Okay. Okay, well.
I got into all the others, just have to say it.
I didn't even apply. I didn't even apply to the Ivy League
Well,
schools.
the reason I applied to Brown, well, first of all, my parents made me apply, but I applied to Brown because you could like design your own major. And I was like, oh my God, that's perfect for me. I'm a writer, I'm a beatnik.
Is that why they're all so insufferable, Brown graduates? I'm sorry, let's not.
I mean, we could go through each school, but we won't talk about mine because we're perfect.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you one more question and then questions from y'all. You've written, as I mentioned, you know, in across all the genres and mediums, and I love that. It's something that when people are like, oh, Saeed, you do all this, I'm like, look at the people who have championed me and helped me, you know, grow as a writer. Is there a genre or a medium that you haven't broken into yet, but you would love to?
No. And what I mean by that is, I have gotten to do everything creatively I've ever wanted to do.
As you should.
I would like more of my film and television work to actually get made.
Yes. Yeah.
The TV game is rough. I love it, and the check's clear. Like, you get paid quite a lot to write shit that will never see the light of day.
But that just seems so maddening.
It's so maddening. Like, I wrote the Untamed State movie, and then Disney bought Fox. It was at one of the Fox studios, and Fox was like, can you take out the kidnapping? But it's a novel about a kidnapping, so no, I can't. And so it's sitting in one of their vaults somewhere, never to be seen.
Damn.
And so, you know, it's all of my ambitions are about like actually just getting better and seeing some of the stuff I've been working on for the past several years actually make it
from that whiteboard.
Yes, onto the screen. But I've written comics. and I'm still writing them. I have written fiction. I'm still writing it. Nonfiction. I'm still writing it. The only thing I don't write is poetry or songs, which are similar. I'm bad at it, and I'm not in a productive way. Like, I'm just bad at it. It's not my ministry. It's not my gift.
Yeah.
I accept that.
I've read. You know, Toni Morrison. She said she wrote some poems. I haven't gotten to see them yet.
I wouldn't mind
but James Baldwin wrote some poems, and I was like, I'm glad you're a wonderful essayist.
I
and
wouldn't mind
novelist.
being able to either make visual art or sing.
Girl, listen this, because we would be insufferable if we could.
I know. If we could sing.
Could you imagine?
I mean, my wife.
My God.
My wife loves to sing, and all day
I
long.
still be home alone
she
trying,
just sings
but
all day, all night. And so when she goes out of town, I'm like, what is wrong in this house? Why is it so quiet? And then I realize, oh my God, she's not singing.
Oh.
I would be the same way. I would sing nonstop. I was like, good morning.
Yeah. We'd be holding space left and right. But anyway, okay.
It's Instacart. Yeah. I would literally never stop. It would just be unbearable. I'd be like Mariah Carey, but not.
Oh, so much worse.
skills.
So much worse. It would be crazy.
I love Mariah.
Okay. Questions. We love Mariah. A songwriter, a writer. Questions from y'all?
Okay. Yes, I have mic'd. Okay, and actually, is someone up top? Yeah. Okay, I'll come. And actually, can I give this one to you, and you get the next one? But I'm gonna go. All right.
You know, one of my favorite pop songs is Mariah of all time. The Roof.
Really?
It's an incredible song. I'll send it to you. It's from Butterfly.
Oh, good
Check.
album though.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hi.
Sorry, I thought you were going to go first. I'm sorry.
No, it's all you.
Hi, gang. I've got a question for both of you. Roxane, for your forthcoming craft manual, and Saeed, for your forthcoming memoir, who are the authors you had to read in order to kind of work your way in there? And feel free to geek out.
That's a great question. So when I decided I was going to do this, I asked my assistant to go buy me every writing manual ever made, ever. Not writing manual, but like book about writing advice, etc. Nadine Gordimer has a really good one, and I'm bad at titles, but I have found that to be incredibly useful and very much in the vein. She gets a lot of shit, but Bird by Anne Lamott is really great.
I reread it recently.
Yeah,
it holds up.
it's really great, and I think people are very cynical, and I wish that we could just maybe embrace sometimes, like, I'm not that kind of writer, but I get what she was doing with that book, and she did it very well. On Writing by Stephen King, which is phenomenal. Matt Salas's came out with a book a couple years ago that I can't remember the title of, but it's brilliant, and it's one of the very few books of writing advice by writers of color. There are none. Like, when you look at the landscape.
Yeah, that's actually.
There are none.
Jericho Brown just published an anthology, How We Do the Work, and it's, rare.
It's super
Craft book,
rare.
yeah.
And also a lot of times when people ask you questions about your writing, and especially when you're Black, they really act like you're a wizard. Like, what kind of magic are you
priest.
doing? I'm like, I have a PhD in rhetoric and technical communication. That's why you feel the way you do when you read my work. It takes a lot of craft. You have this emotional reaction because I want you to.
Yeah.
And so that's why one of the many reasons I decided to write a craft book is, like, one, we just don't see a lot from writers of color, but two, people think that we don't have any craft-based skills, that it's just like magical Negro-ness. And that's not the case. But yeah, those are some of the books that I really look to. On writing, Stephen King is the man. I'm a fan.
Yeah. Oh God. So Home Out There. So it has these big anchor chapters, and of which you heard a part of, that are like with the ancestors. So those are, you get a sense of the flow of that, and those. I mean, I have an entire, well, actually, it's a bookshelf and a half now just for the Langston chapter. It's. But I would say, it started with me writing these vignettes about travel and realizing that I had a relationship. Like, my mom passed away, and a year later I circled the globe by myself. I had a breakup, and I went to Argentina, and all like these different trips. So I was writing travel vignettes. So really it started with me reading travel writing because I was like, something is off. And what I realized was that I did not want to write a travel book because travel logs are tools of empire. So I would read a lot of Mark Twain's essays about, like, at the time they were called the Sandwich Islands, because he would be paid by, like, he was a journalist, but also he was being paid by, like, the shipping companies to be like, by the way, on your way there, like, why don't you mention, like, how fast the boats are and how great it is, and so, like, so much of travel writing then and now, right? There's like, come to Bali, it's so beautiful, right? And then everyone goes to Bali, and then Balinese people are like, Jesus, Bali, like, I went to Bali in 2012 and was already seeing, like, an overwhelming sense of gentrification. And I can't imagine what it's like now, So I was reading a lot of good and bad travel writing to try to figure out what I wanted to do. I really felt I had to, like, write against, and so that's why I, like, started moving toward home, and out of that, this tension. And then, I think, and, part of it's just, like, books I was reading anyway, but, Christina Sharp's writing, In the Wake, and, notebooks.
Ordinary Notes.
Ordinary Notes, thank you. In the Wake, Ordinary Notes were really important books. Afro-Pessimism, his name is escaping me. And then there's one more author who's coming, Saidiya Hartman, Lose Your Mother, and her most recent book, Wayward Lives, Marvelous Experiment, which is to say, books by Black cultural critics that have a blend of the personal and the cultural, where they do where I do, where, like, I was just like, here's my experience. Like, I know for sure I have a relationship, like, and you hear it in another section, like my grandmother when I was 12 or 13, like we're just alone in the living room and she just looks at me, puts down her book, Pat Robertson, and looks at me and says, worldly, that's how you're acting now, you know? So I was like, I've got, something's up, you know? So for me, it was like looking at different book structures, and like Sadia Hartman and Christina Sharp, like they all like kind of have they've intuited something, and then they go into the archives or into the literary to do it, and so that helped. And now, you know, it just came out and I saw her on the way. That's why Harvard is really amazing, walking in to the building this afternoon. Imani Perry.
Oh, the Blue Book? I'm
Blue-
reading it right now.
Blacks, I always mix up the
I
blues and
just call
blacks,
it the
blacks
Blue
and
Book.
blues. Yeah, the Blue Book. It's incredible. But again, she's like, and I love it. I was like, yeah, she's like, Black people have a relationship to the color blue. It comes up a lot. And you follow it through, and she proves it through history. Yeah, so yeah, that's what I was interested in. Like someone going, I have a vibe, I have an intuition, and then seeing where it takes you. And a lot of it's unexpected, but you know, we stand on the shoulders of tremendous ancestors. You know, Haitian Revolution. You know, like this is the history that brings someone like Roxane Gay and Claudine Gay to this place. And so, yeah, when you're able to use the work and the rigor to tap into that ancestry, that's also the book you're reading. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
Hello.
Oh, wait, is it on the line?
It is.
Now on the line.
Woo!
Wonderful.
Her.
First off, thank you for all of this. Hey. And also, for my wish for you, Roxane, is that you do sing randomly and narrate your life that way. My question is about writing and teaching. So I come from a fiction background, TV, plays, and the like, and I've been called upon several times in the last couple years to mentor folks who are writing memoir. And so my question, and take it as you will, is what is your relationship to the truth when you're writing memoir and you're writing creative nonfiction? And just one example, in talking to students about some of these things, I was talking to a student and suggested perhaps they allied a scene, and they were like, but these are two different conversations, right? I talked to my grandma that day, and then I talked to her another day, so I have to have those take place in two different time spaces, right? And I said, you should ask a memoirist. so I am asking memoirists.
I mean, the reality is that most memoirists collapse moments and scenes, because your job as a memoirist is not to record everything that happened as it happened. That's autobiography.
Yeah.
And it's really important to know the difference. And autobiography is a thing, but memoir is about memory. It's generally deeply focused, and instead of like the span of a lifetime. And I believe the truth matters, but it is the truth that these words were said between these people. It doesn't matter that it happened on 2 different days, unless like those days were 75 years apart or something that would be relevant to the story. And so I always ask my students to consider, like, what's the truth? And sometimes truth is flexible, but not in the way that is mendacious. It's flexible in that it doesn't matter if the curtains were red or blue, if the curtains were torn down in a scene that you're writing. What matters is that there were curtains. If you don't exactly remember the color, that's okay. And our memories are fallible. You can ask 3 siblings the same question, and you're going to get 3 different answers, because there are 3 different versions of the truth, and each person is going to believe that truth. And so that's another way of thinking about it. If you ask my brothers the same question you ask me, our answers are going to be buck wild and very different, but they're also going to be the truth. And so that's how I try to approach it with my students. But I also give them some readings from John D'Agata and The Lifespan of a Fact, because he got into a months-long correspondence with his fact checker, because he had made up quite a lot of stuff. And he was just like, you know, it's creative nonfiction. I can do what I want. And so this whole correspondence arose, and he actually ended up making a book out of it to examine truth and memoir. And I highly recommend people reading that. I actually disagree with a lot of what he says, but I do think it really does help younger creative nonfiction writers recognize that writers of all abilities and levels are grappling with this question. But also don't lie.
Yeah, don't lie. And something this is always, it was the axiom, not just what we would say, but I would just say, like, don't be an asshole. You know what it feels like when you're trying your best to render a memory on the page. You know what it feels like when you're trying your best, and you know what it feels like when you're pushing. You know what I mean? And I enjoy the productive anxiety of understanding that we are all unreliable narrators. That is, and that the memoir in particular is about memory. It is about the difficulty. So I enjoy it. So, that's the dance. And so, we're using fictive techniques often, like dialogue, for example, to try to deepen our relationship with the truth. So, I think in memoir, you should be more sparing with dialogue. Which of those two conversations is more important is one of those questions I would ask. Can one of those conversations be relayed, paraphrased? This is something we had talked about before. The other day, this is what what's more essential? Because the longer an exchange of dialogue goes on in nonfiction, the more I feel like my willful suspension of disbelief is being tested. But also, I like incorporating the difficulties and the disruptions. Like, though it's not about memory, I'm really interested in the emotional experience of doing archival research. And so when I read that scene with his father, I was like, to just keep going, and to just go on to like the next passage of his life just felt like it wasn't the truth. I was so, like, I had to take the rest of the day. I had to stop writing. And so I was like, oh, I should talk with the reader, and then that led me into some interesting thoughts about, like, I wasn't planning on writing about internalized racism, but it's actually really relevant for people like Polly and Langston who could pass at other races, and it came up in their lives. Or in How We Fight, there's a scene where I just like forget something that my grandmother said at a really important moment, and I say, I wish I could have, So I think the joy is in acknowledging, studying the difficulties, the hard edges, and then finding creative ways to acknowledge them and earn that trust. Like the reader goes, oh, I like that Roxane said she didn't remember what happened at that point. Actually, that makes me trust her as a writer a little bit more.
Other questions? I know we have some from the Zoom, so sorry, you have one. Go ahead.
As writers who work in multiple genres, I guess I'm curious about, first of all, sort of at what point you know what you're writing, and also what genre it calls for, or like what container, just kind of how you make your way to that, and if sort of where the project.
Because you have more. I work with my agents and my editors, and it's an ongoing dialogue, and I'm like, I think I've got something here. I muddle and then I go full throttle. So yeah, I'm just like, what do you think? And I'm always sending little tiskets and taskets. And yeah, for me, it's my collaborators saying, yes, this is worth even changing the schedule around. That's my thing.
I know going in.
Yeah.
It's not a mystery.
Yes!
Well, if I'm going to write a comic, I'm going to write a comic. If I'm going to write a short story, well, except I will say for fiction. Sometimes fiction starts as a short story, ends up as a novel or a novella. But in general, I do know the genre going in.
I love work.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions from the Zoom. And one is, first, thank you for sharing your work and for doing this panel. We also appreciate that. The question is, how do you balance creativity against your jobs/other obligations? Do you have tips on how you switch your line of thinking from responsibilities to creative pursuits?
I mean, if I had a good answer, I would be rich indeed.
Yeah.
I am always trying to figure that out. I teach at Rutgers, and I have a really great job there. I only teach one class a semester, it's a dream. It's just a dream. But still, grading, syllabus planning, preparing for class, it does take a different sort of mind track. And so I've tried a lot of different things, like I'm going to do these kinds of tasks on this day. I'm going to do these kinds of tasks on this day. You know, Tuesdays for email. It never works.
Yeah.
I'm the problem. I mean, I'm the common denominator. Hey, it's me, as the TikToks say. Also, TikTok is a problem. But
I love it.
I love it so much. My dad introduced me to TikTok, and I'm just so into it. It's my favorite TV show. It's just my favorite. They're so funny. They're so clever. But
I've learned so much
and
about
thus
animals.
you just saw my creative process. But I struggle with it, and so I just do the best that I can. But I will say during the school year, I do prioritize my teaching because I'm being paid to be there.
Yeah, I have like 8 jobs. I believe in saying no. I believe that saying no protects, because all of the jobs I mean, we get to, this is my job today.
I know, the job is good.
My job today was, you know what I mean? Like, oh my God, what a privilege. So the no is not just I can't do this. The no is I can't do this, and I have to protect my time with this. I have to be able to, the world does actually, I'm sorry, need to fall away in this moment. So that's really it. And learning that I always need more time than I think I'm going to. I just always need more time.
I'm such a liar to myself. Like, I'm gonna wake up at 6 and I'm gonna knock out this 3,000 word essay by 10.
Oh, that's wild.
5 weeks later.
Yeah.
It's just bad.
Yeah,
It's
I mean, the
bad.
Langston chapter, I was like, oh, this will be like a few months. I started it in April of 2024, and I finished it this January,
Ooh.
the first draft. Yeah, and I was like, 6 weeks?
You got it. You got it. I believe
But I
in
don't
you.
know, I talk to writers and I ask about it all the time. No one's good at time management. No one's good at time management.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I just want to, I'm looking at the room, and then I have one more from the Zoom that I'll read.
One more from the Zoom.
And then we have, it's almost 5:30.
Oh, per.
So what's your advice for someone struggling with feeling justified in the space, the space their personal stories and opinions take up, especially if you're part of a marginalized group or several marginalized groups? So again, what's your advice to someone struggling with feeling justified in the space their personal stories and opinions take up, especially if you're part of a marginalized group or several?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question, but I think you're getting at, like, how do I give myself the space to express my opinions when I kind of feel like they're too much? It's not too much. You know, you're not taking up space in a bad way. Everybody takes up space. It's just a physical reality, and it's also an emotional reality. And I don't think taking up space is a bad thing, but we have been trained culturally to believe that it is. Now, some people take up too much space, or some people take up space in ways that are, what's the nicest word I can think of? In ways that are very colonizing. And in ways that don't respect the fact that you take up space alongside other people taking up space. And so really just claim the space that you deserve and use it wisely and responsibly. But also, why not? It's like again, like as I was mentioning earlier, so many people talk themselves out of using their voice, talk themselves out of expressing an opinion. Especially in a first world context, well, until recently, you have every right to express your opinions. And maybe it's not going to be popular, but popular is overrated. So just allow yourself to take up space, claim that space and hold it.
Yeah, I think I would have answered this question differently a few years ago. First, I will say, I think it's important to live in thick community. Different contexts, different ages, different intimacies, people who are good at different things. And part of that is, and like I said, like the agents I work with, the editors, people who will say, Saeed, this isn't ready, put it back, or you get a little wild, baby. You a bit much. Let's Isaac, like, sometimes I'm like, I'm about to hit send on this social media post. Take a look. I was like, I like my job here at Harvard. What's up? And he's like, Jason's in the room. He's like, would it stress out Jason? And I'm like, no, hit send. friend. So yes, you need that. But here's what I will say now. I'm over it. I'm sick of it. It's an excuse. It's an excuse taking up space. How dare you? I really think when we get down to it, it is either white guilt, how dare you? Or it is someone from a marginalized identity, and it sounds like they are, who is starting to try to survive on the poison they are feeding us. Life is precious. And I think if you are a reasonable person doing work you believe in, if you realize you're standing on someone's neck, move your foot. But generally speaking, like I feel like we're getting into this, the stakes are too high. We all need us doing the work. Like Rachel Katz says, like out of the work comes the work. I feel a desperate need for insight and new perspectives. And one of the very few things we can control in this world is ourselves. So I get it. I might need to yell at myself tomorrow, like, where's my voice memo so I can just like replay it, but I'm over it. I'm over it. Yes, it's hard, but it's needed. And I just think at some point, you have to want to do this work more than what you're doing right now. It just, you know what I mean? Like I just remember earlier on feeling like it would be a soul death of some kind for me not to be able to become a writer.
Well, and it's also like along those lines, I often tell my
Sorry to like end by yelling at someone on Zoom. But.
Yeah, no, sometimes we just need to hear it.
True.
But I think about what I tell my women students in particular, but really anyone who sort of is always putting themselves down or taking themselves out of contention or just deciding I'm going to make myself small and invisible. They're not going to love you more. They're not going to like you more. They're not going to give you more access because you do what they want you to do. They're going to actually just know that they can take more advantage of you.
Yeah.
And so don't do their work for them.
It is hard being a person, but I think I would say, because like working with this book and like seeing like how Langston responded to anti-Blackness in stark contrast to his father, for example, right? We know what it looks like when someone tries to, like you mentioned, like with Milo, like, gay men or, like undocumented immigrants aligning themselves with an administration that is like, they are not your friend. We know what it feels like when you, from a distance, see someone, lining up with people who are going to turn on them the first chance they get.
I mean, did you read the article about the people from Venezuela who were like, yeah, I know he's going to deport us, but
Did I?
still support
Read it
him?
while pacing because I was so upset. Yeah, so we know what that looks like. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is when you try to diminish yourself, I need you to understand that that's actually the same thing. Mm-hmm. That's the exact same thing. It's a different cast, it's the same script, right? Like if you were trying to diminish yourself to be less threatening, what you were saying is you're trying to self-annihilate. And isn't that what white supremacy is trying to do anyway? You're doing white supremacy's job. Mm-hmm. And it can feel like, but it's like a soft violence, mm-hmm. And so so look, being a person is hard. It takes community, it takes support, all of it. I'm not saying that this is easy, but I do know that that is one of the very few things that we are able to determine for ourselves. Do I deserve to be here, and do I deserve to be heard?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen. Well, whew. Thank you, Boom.
Thank you both. Thank you both for sharing so much of yourselves today. That's really, what we come for because we need it. And, it's a blessing to us. So thank you both, Roxane and Saeed. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
And we'll see you at our next event.
Yay.
Thanks.
Ooh, get this off before I get in any more trouble. So we can talk.